Right, so moving into it, I'm from Yeehaa Fishing, which is shop in Panmure. If you don't know of us yet, hopefully most of you do. Hopefully some don't. We've got some new customers. We're a specialist tackle store. We're just a small little store. We specialise in lure fishing. And one thing that we all like at Yeehaa is bluefin fishing. Between myself, Paul and Sato who work there, we all do a heap of bluefin fishing. This year I haven't been down, and none of the boys, because we've been a little bit busy unfortunately. But last year we were pretty much, one of us was down there pretty much every week for the 9 weeks of the season. So we try and keep in the loop so we can obviously help you guys catch more as well. So how it started, so I'll talk a little bit about Bluefin Fishery. Last year when I came here, I would have spoken about the biomass and where it was at the time. They do a study every 3 years, so the CCSPT, the Commission for Conservation of Southern Bluefin Tuna. That's been around since the 1980s. It was introduced in the 80s because the population basically crashed. It got down to as little as what they estimated to be at like 3% at one point. They basically put in limits internationally between Australia, New Zealand and Japan. Since then the population, well actually from the 80s till the early 2000s never grew. They found Japan was overfishing the population by 125,000 tonnes a year. They shut that down. From 2007 to 2017 it got to 13%. Last year when I would have done this talk, we would have been talking about it being sitting at somewhere about 20%. And then the current state, they always study every 3 years, and last year the biomass is now at an estimated 23% of its spawning biomass. Okay guys, so it's a fishery that's been looked after. It's been internationally looked after, which also means that we have to look after it too. So as anglers, we can't obviously just take everything. There is a limit of 1 per person per day, but obviously take that, obviously some of them can be big fish up to 180 kilos, so obviously that's, it might be the limit, but you can fish to what you need. So Waihau Bay from the beginning. So I've fished it from the beginning in 2017. The fishery, from what I've seen, has it's improved dramatically. I'm just going to skip out of this. I will come back and forth from this thing, so there might be a little bit of... I couldn't copy this to my screen. Can everyone see that? I'll just zoom in on it. Look at that. So there is no data from 2017 because when it started there were no surveys. They didn't survey any of the fishery. So the first survey year was 2018 because obviously before this happened, southern bluefin were either caught off Westport greymouth during the Pacific run that they have down south, and the odd fish of like less than 6 fish a year were caught. 2017, there was some information put out there that the southern bluefin were running off Waihau Bay. A whole bunch of us rec anglers ran down there. I ran down there in one of the first weeks and was lucky enough to catch one. And since then, they've now studied how many fish are caught. This little piece is from basically the survey that John Holdsworth does every year. So last year, there was 1,200 trailers fished out of Waihau Bay for a total of 650 southern bluefin, so 50% are catching. So it's going from 2018, when 678 trailers fished for 34 recorded southern bluefin. So as you can see, last year was quite a big jump, even from 2022. It was quite a big jump from 300 to 600. So the point I'm making here is that it's a growing fishery. Like it's something that, because it is internationally protected, it's something that we hopefully for years to come it'll continue to get better and better. Now, the season just been was one that, as you can see, was 50% better than the year before, and for a lot of boats was even better than that. And we had a big recruitment of small fish come into our fishery, because you'll also notice the mean weight has dropped from 70 kilos to 46 kilos. Not so much, don't so much look at that as a bad thing as that the size has dropped. There's still a lot of big fish, like we're still catching a lot of 80 kilo plus fish. This year there's already been a lot of 120 kilo plus fish weighed, but there's a lot of recruitment of small fish coming into the population as well.
How long does it take to get a fish to the 120 kgs?
I'm not sure, but I think the spawning size, which is 70 kilos, anyone correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure a 70 to 80 kilo fish is like 7 years old or something, or 8 years. It's about 7 or 8 years old to create a spawning fish. Got a little safety note. So all of us here are probably trailer boats. most of this chat's going to be about Yeehaa Bay. It's in my mind the best place to fish. It's the easiest place to target them. I'm going to talk about other places that you can get them from, but Yeehaa Bay, because, this right here, the reason why we focus on this area is this is satellite tagging data from southern bluefin. On the far right there where Yeehaa Bay is, you'll notice it's the closest point to East Cape where they come in. Okay, and so basically because we're fishing in the middle of winter, June, July, August, it's rough, you know. We're often in trailer boats from anything from, I got customers fishing in 14-foot boats all the way to big trailer boats that are 10 meters, but it gives us the closest point of access to them so we can do it the safest that we can. Okay, but yeah, that just kind of shows you, obviously these fish here are all heading north on their migratory route. Some go south and some go back around, but as they've been tagged, they're generally heading sort of northeast, and they're going to cut the corner the closest to Yeehaa Bay.
Luke, are they individual fish?
Correct. Yeah, so the picture's not great because I've stolen it off the internet, but every colour is a different southern. Yeah.
Right,
Okay.
It's not a tagged fish that popped up.
Well, each colour, like the yellow colour is where he went.
Or one fish.
Yeah, is one fish. So the green fish, which you can see there, is the only fish that went to spawn. Like I do as much research as I can about these fish, obviously because I want to catch the most I can. So where A is what they call the East Timor box, which is where they spawn. So that is now a reserve. So they used to also catch them up there commercially. That is now a reserve. Most of the fish that they've studied that go there are generally over 80 kilos, which is what they class as their spawning fish. Yeah. But as I was saying to a few people, like the fishery's so new. So like for us, it's only been here since 2017. If someone said to you, go catch me a southern bluefin 20 years ago, the population was half of what we have now. So as the population continues to grow, the numbers and where they go has changed. Like fisheries have popped up in places that have never had southern fisheries. So it's kind of hard. All of this is quite new for everyone. You know, like Aussie have such great fishing because the fish spawn and travel around them. We're kind of at the extreme limits of where they travel. So our fishery, as the population grows, will get new and cooler stuff happen. Just like what we had happen last year with a lot more smaller fish arriving. So we're Yeehaa Bay, obviously, which is our main target. Whakatane, Tauranga, Whangamata, Tairua and Whitianga. All of those destinations there are great places to leave from, which can help us get to the areas where they are running. That little line there is kind of an indication of where they travel. They generally travel upside and outside the 1,000 metre line. The reason why we like Yeehaa Bay is it's the closest point to that. Every other destination has quite a long travel. Not to say it's not a good place to target them, but fishing in June, July and August, it can be rough and can be hard to get to those places. So, and like this year, like I've followed this since 2017. In 2017, the fishery kind of started like end of June. It was like the 20th of June. I went down there on like the 7th of July. From 7th of July through July, it was like this massive boom of fish. This season just been kicked off on like the 12th of May. The boys were seeing them down there while they were sword fishing through early May. And this year is like 4 weeks ahead of every season we've seen. The fish are in a lot shallower than we've ever seen, which makes it like anyone who's a pro at catching southerns is kind of not, because it's like every year it's different. Every year as the population grows, we're having something happen where now our season's hopefully 4 weeks longer. Okay, so it's it's a hard one. Like this 13th of June today is generally the start of the season. So in the last 5 years, the first bluefin's been caught between the 10th and 15th of June for the last 5 years. This year it was caught 3 weeks early. This is last year's slideshow. This year they've now started in May, so you've May through to August. My favourite time to fish, and everyone asks me when I go down, this year I'm going down from generally end of July through to August. August is my favourite time to fish. There's generally no one there and way more fish around. Everyone gets pretty excited, so do I. Last year I went down 5 times. But time of year is now changing, but generally June through August. Moon, got a little slide here, which I showed you guys last year. My little moon chart. Okay, this is every trip me, Sato and Paul has done to Yeehaa. This is real scientific. This is just when we've caught them based on the moon. And what I'm trying to present is the fact that we've caught them at every point. So I have a lot of customers that come in and they're like, I only fish this part of the moon, I only fish at this time. I highly recommend fishing when it's calm enough to go fishing. If you wait for the right moon and the right time and everything, it'll never happen. So I'm just trying to show that we've caught them pretty much through the entire moon cycle, okay? Obviously, after the full moon and then from the new moon round, seems to be pretty good, but we've caught them from the third through the new. We haven't done, a huge amount of fishing, and there's only based off 3 of us at Yeehaa, but that's showing that we've caught them pretty much the whole way around the moon cycle.
And a quick question, you said you're catching them shallower this year. We've always
Yep.
been 1,200, 1,300 metres of water.
Yep.
What sort of depth are you finding this year?
Well, I haven't been there yet, but like the original run, the first 5 that were caught in 700 metres of water. So inside the sea valley, which is pretty shallow for the very first ones. So like the original, like usually every year, I'm just going to go through a couple of slides. Look at that, it's the Mark Sphere engine, quickly. So like usually, last year, if anyone who was in my chat, the first ones were being caught here, okay? So Yeehaa Bay's down here. I'll try not to stand, look at this. Try not to stand in front of it. So, like that, eh? Yeehaa Bay's down here. That's the sea valley. Okay, so I'll go through some general areas while we're here. Waikowell Sea Valley, that's what they call the sea valley. You've got Lawton Point, which is in here. You've got the Cape, okay? And then this here, that's Hicks Bay. Usually the first ones that are caught around the 10th of June are usually caught here, okay? This year, they were caught like 3 weeks early and caught here. So we probably missed the initial run as well. Like they've obviously already travelled all that way through there and no one's found them because no one was there fishing. So as this population continues to grow, and hopefully it grows exponentially, you know, the bigger the biomass of spawning fish is, it will exponentially grow on the bell curve. Hopefully we'll see more of this stuff happen year to year. But to give you an idea, that's how early this season is.
How far are they moving sort of each day on average?
I don't know, sorry. Again, they say they travel like 2 nautical miles a day. Last year I caught them over 3 months in the same place for 3 months, and like they weren't really moving as much and they weren't traveling through. It's a bit of an unknown, I'll be honest. Because yeah, one year we have a theory and then the next year it gets blown out of the water. So back to the moon. Any questions on the moon cycle? Everyone going to go fishing whenever they can now? Good.
Around the full moon, that generally they were down deep.
I hate the full moon. I personally wouldn't fish either side of it, but
Yeah, that's what we found. We went on the full moon,
yeah.
marking them all down at like 300 metres.
I haven't had that. I haven't had that so much, but I've just had that it's slow, generally slow fishing. But usually like a couple days either side is good. Leading in, leading out is usually pretty good, apart from the day of the full moon. Okay. And that's like one thing, like I'll just clear up, like there's a lot of commercial information that a lot of this is based off, you know, like originally in 2017, obviously the information came from the commercial sector. Their fishing to our fishing is like chalk and cheese. They fish at night doing a 20-mile set. We fish during the day in small little trailer boats trucking around at 6 knots, traveling, covering bugger all ground. So I try not to get too caught up in what the commercial fishery is doing, and as a recreational group, just based on what we're doing. Finding tunas, depth. Now depth is a big one, like when you ask where to put the gear in. Now I've found, in the trips I've done last season, I definitely found when I've been fishing on when I've got down to Yeehaa and been fishing, whatever depth somebody else has been catching them at, I've often found that they're like running at that depth. So I had last year we had really good fishing one trip out in like 1700. I went down about a week and a half later, went straight out to 1700, caught nothing all day, came back in on my way home, caught one in like 1300 on the way home, just a Hail Mary right in the end of the day. Heard someone call up in the afternoon and say, has anyone caught any tunas? One dude came over the radio and was like, I caught 3 in 1250, which we happened to be right next to him at the time. Like we're just Hail Mary straight lining it back to the ramp at the end of the day. We happened to be right next to him. We went back there the next day and caught 5 more the next day in 1200. And it was just that, at that time, depending on where the fish have moved, what I've found is if other people are catching at a certain depth, go onto that depth line, because often they'll be running along that. Talking about structure, like out of Yeehaa, there's obviously the sea valley, which is a great place to start because there is a piece of structure. And then if you're leaving from other ports, when we talk about that, we've got other areas like you got like the Mercury Knoll, the Alderman Rise, the Aldi Knoll, the West Ngātoro, if I've said that correctly. You've got the back of the Rangatira, so this is the Rangatira Rise here, you've got the back of the Rangatiras, and so you've got structure leading up through here, which is going to give areas that bait will hold, that when the fish are running past will then hold them onto. So if you are leaving from any of these other ports, they're good areas to start because the rest of it's open ocean. For you to bump into them in the rest of the ocean, it's going to be a little bit more random, where if you go to one of those areas, there's a good chance there'll be current pushing onto one of the edges, you'll find some bait, and then if the tunas are running through there, it might hold them while you're there. Birds. So whenever I've been down there, if we've seen any of those blackbirds, the petrels and all that kind of stuff, albatross, anything like that, wherever we found areas of birds, fantastic fishing. Usually any bird life will mean that there's food in the area, and we had it last year actually on those dates there were so many birds around that we're getting them tangled in our riggers, and they're obviously feeding on the same stuff that the bluefin are feeding on, which is these really little, like small little salp looking things and jellyfish and stuff like that. So birds, I definitely recommend keeping your eye open for birds the whole time. Sharing info would have to be the biggest one. I always say this to clubs, that you guys should all work together. Club rooms are like the best place to get information from. Sharing information is huge. Like the amount of tunas that I've caught down there because somebody's either given information or we've given information to people has helped us catch them. And talking to other boats while you're down there. And again, as a club, if you guys are heading down to Waiho, having a club chat so you guys can all work together will definitely help you catch more. So, back to where we were, using a sounder. Couple of stories from the season just been. In the boat out there, I put a brand new Simrad kit in, little plug for them. I found it really effective this season just been in spending my time in areas that were better than others by, like you say, like when you're marking fish down deep, we'd often mark fish anywhere between, generally marking them between 90 and 120 metres, okay? So a lot of people ask me what depth I was setting my sounder at. At the start of the season, I was only fishing the top 100, just in the idea of that if I marked anything, I'd raise it. I quickly changed away from that and looking down to 120 metres, or 150 metres, sorry, on my sounder. The biggest reason for that was I was starting to mark them down in that deeper layer, that 90 to 120 metres, sitting on top of them and then waiting for the bite time. So if we go back to this chart here, again, you'll notice a lot of the bite times on this chart, like I've written when we've caught them. Okay, so a lot of the times we've caught them have been first thing in the morning, 7:30 till lunchtime, or in the afternoon, so like after 2 o'clock. And so what I've kind of found is there are two very big bite times during the day. 7 a.m. till 10 a.m, we generally catch 80% of our fish, and if I haven't caught one by then, we generally don't get a lot of bites till 3 p.m. And so how I was basing my days is I would drive around from 7 to 10 a.m. in the best possible area I thought, fish that area till 10 a.m. At 10 a.m, I would talk to my crew, say, shit, what do you guys think? If we hadn't caught anything, marked anything, I would then travel. Okay, my biggest thing was I would just travel. I would beeline it, I'd pick up my revs, and I would just travel. Actually, in that far left-hand shot, which I've just cut out, you can see how I'm just doing like a big zigzag, and I'm doing 7.5 knots, and I've marked a pack of tunas there on that far left-hand screen. And in that screen, I'm basically just gridding out as much area as I can to try and find them again. You'll see it's 10 o'clock in the morning. It's quite early, but I've just legged it. I'm just trying to find fish. And then what I'll do is I'll just travel. Once I start marking fish, I'll then start working that area, and then I'll try and be there for 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And the amount of fish I've then caught from 3 o'clock through till dark by just staying in an area where I've been marking them. It was a real effective technique for me last year, and I caught a lot late afternoon. And then it also, even if I didn't catch them in the afternoon, it gave me a lot of confidence to go somewhere in the morning. Yes, sir.
When you mean an area, how big is your area? Like what?
Just like, I don't know, a couple of miles. I'll just run like, I'll be marking them on the screen as they're coming through, and then I'll just keep gridding out, and I'll just keep going bigger until I'm not marking them. If I don't mark them for half an hour, then I'll go back through, and if I mark them as I go back through the area, I'll start pulling in my area. And it worked real well for me in some instances where in the afternoon, I may have only caught one in the afternoon, but I was marking them really well. The fishing was pretty tough, and then the next morning gone back there at 7 o'clock in the morning and had the best fishing of my life. And so that was a real good technique for me, using my sounder just to identify where they are and then put myself there the next day. Okay?
Two sounders there.
Yep.
When you're getting your revs up and you're trying to find the fish at 7.4.
Yeah.
So then you're 2.6.
Oh, that's because I'll be fighting fish.
Okay.
So my usual speed, I'm about 6 knots. So this middle screen, I'm doing 5.8. So that's about my usual trolling speed, is about 6 knots.
That's quite slow, eh?
Yeah. So I'll slow right down. Once I think I'm in an area where fish are, I'll slow right down. And then if I'm traveling, I'll speed up just to cover more ground. Okay, they seem to really like the slower speed.
Because the guys in the States are running faster now.
On the West Coast fishery, you mean?
And running those nomads are like talking about 14, 15.
Yeah, so that's a whole different fishery. So that West Coast fishery, I fished with a guy, I've actually fished with him every year. His name's Steve Lightfoot. He made a show that probably a lot of you guys like. He made that Punisher show, if anyone you guys watch it on Netflix. He fishes in that fishery, and they use those a lot. They get a lot of different styles of schooling tunas. I told him about us fishing these skirted lures, and he was like, we'd never catch a fish on a skirted lure. But they fish often like a swimming ballyhoo, which they fish at like 4 knots. And they fish those nomads when they either get like breezing tunas or foaming tunas. It depends what the tunas are doing. If the tunas are banked up in an area, they fish the ballyhoos or a flying fish. So very different fisheries. The high-speed trolling is when the fish are really shy, so they fish the lures real long. So that it might come to our fishery one day, but every fishery is different, and I'm just trying to obviously tell you guys what I've found works for our fishery. I noticed the Americans, when they're towing ballyhoos, they drop down to like 4 to 4.5 knots. I got my ass handed to me one day, like 2019 maybe, where Aaron Sargent on Strictly Fishing was fishing right next to us, and I was fishing on a mate's boat, and he kept catching, and we kept overtaking him. So like we'd be trolling along side by side, and we just kept overtaking him. And then next minute we'd look over, and he'd be going round and round. And then he'd be trolling again, and we just kept buzzing past him. And we got back to the pub, and he came up to my mate Tony. He goes, "How fast are you guys going?" And Tony's like, "I was just doing my normal trolling speed." Aaron's like, "Drop down to 6 knots." And then the next day we went out within like 20 minutes, caught one straight away. Dropped down to 6 knots. So for me, it's just worked really well.
So when you're prospecting, are you
Yep.
in and out of the contour lines?
Yeah, I'm just basically running a line that I like. So I'm just running a line and I'm just zigzagging it, just trying to cover ground as much as I can.
Because it's comfortable, or you like because...
Well, I'm having a zigzag. The reason I'm having a zigzag is I guarantee you that I'll have like a nor'easter, and I'm trying to head east. So I'm just having a zigzag, so I'm not punching directly into it. Otherwise, if I had the wind available, I'd just do I'd do a small zigzag so that I'm not going straight down sea, because I don't want to speed up and slow down too much. So I'll just be doing that for comfort while trying to cover as much ground as I can. Yeah. So, boat setup. Trolling, 5 to 6 knots. I actually end up having to change the props on my boat. Sounds real stupid, but I've actually dropped to a smaller pitch. I'm down to a 19 pitch, so I can go slower, because with the duo, I was getting a bit of vibration off the back prop, cutting the front prop's ear. Sounds stupid, but my 19s allow me to go slower and work way better. We set our lures further back, so compared to marlin fishing, we're dropping our lures a lot further back. Tunas can be a lot shyer of the boat. They can often not be. There's videos of guys getting bit right on the short corner. I've caught them off the very first wave, but often more so when they're in a schooling mentality. When we've caught a lot of singles, they're either on a rigger or a shotgun, and those rigger and shotguns, we're generally starting on the 4th wave, so 2 waves further back than we would marlin fishing. So our lures are extremely long, and we're often catching those singles on those long lures. When we come across packs of them, we often get them on the shorts, but I think that's just the pack feeding mentality from them.
How pedantic are you about where the lure sits on the wave face?
When it's real rough, not really, because you can't control it. But I'll try and get them so that they're not blowing out too often. And if they are blowing out too often, I'll often go to a squid chain. So I'll get that very shortly. Tag lines, which is what I showed you guys before. That's a picture of my boat and how the rods would be set up, running tag lines off each rig, so 2 lures off each rigger, giving me a good width, and then obviously reducing the drop back.
So why don't you just run out the corner rather than using a tag line?
Because we're dropping the lures further back, they often get a little bit lazy and sluggish, and also they get pulled into the prop wash a lot, and so it just gives them a little bit better water, a little bit more height, and a little bit more width. And yeah, because we're dropping further back, they just get a little bit sluggish. So skirted lures, divers, bibless lures. Personally, myself, I don't fish a lot of bibless or divers. Okay, a lot of guys have success on them. The way I put it is, if you're going to fish bib lures, you need to fish a spread of bib lures with skirted lures added into it. Okay, so you fish bibs and you add a skirt or two to your spread. If you're going to fish skirted lures, just stick to skirted lures. I've tried to fish bib lures every year, and because it's often rough or there's a big swell, it's good if it's calm. If you've got beautiful conditions and it's nice and calm, it's good. Often it's rough, and when you turn down sea, your boat speed, you might only be doing 6 knots, but you'll pick up to 9 knots. The bib lure will pull out, blow over a rigger. It's now rough and you have a tangle. So I just try and stick to just a spread of 5 skirted lures if it's rough. And sometimes when it's rough, we drop down to 3. We just keep it simple, and we just have 3 out.
Do you use those, I don't know what they're called, it's like I think it's called a drift or something? Like you put it down, it's got heaps of little fish on a ribbon?
Dredge?
Dredge, yeah.
Dredge. No, we don't fish a dredge while bluefin fishing, no. So we just generally stick to 5 skirted lures, and instead of fishing a dredge, we don't want to fish anything that doesn't have a hook. Because anything that doesn't have a hook in it, a bluefin will eat it and you'll regret it. So everything we fish behind the boat, we don't fish teasers. Everything, if we're going to fish a squid chain, which is something like this one here, like if we're going to have a squid chain and put that out, we will have that, but we'll always have a lure behind it. So, and we'll often fish sometimes between 2 and like 4 of these at one time, at any one time. I should have a couple more I'm missing.
So you mean the lure is actually attached behind the thing?
Correct.
Swimming by itself?
Correct, yeah. So we'll have this in front of it. Just going to get you to hold that. And then, I try and colour code them. So, and then we'll be connecting our lure. Look at that. Do you feel a part of it? So then we'll have our lure running behind it, which will be sitting about 1.5 to 2 metres behind the squid chain. Okay, so the squid chains do quite a bit for us. Yes, sir.
Run birds on that as well?
Not on a chain. Like this chain has a floppy, so it's kind of those floppies will do what a bird does. I often fish, if I'm going to fish a bird, I often just fish the bird on its own. You can just chuck it on later over the table. Look at that. So there's a few reasons why we run these chains. Chains do a few things for us, which I'll draw on the whiteboard as well later on. But what they create is they create drag. Okay, so a chain creates drag when it's really windy. I don't know if you guys have been fishing out there. If you put this little lure, like a heat, it's one of our best little lures. It's only small, so it doesn't have a lot of weight. It doesn't have a lot of resistance. It's only got a little cup. If you put that out on your rigger, the wind will blow your line out. Your lures are now 7 waves back, so they're very long. You've got a lot of line out. It creates a very big bow in your line. What happens then is it can either blow over another lure, or it's like nowhere near the rest of your lures. It can be blowing right out of your spread, and we want to keep our lures together, okay? Because if a school of tunas come up, we don't want one lure out by itself. We want them as a school. And so the chain creates drag. All these squids hitting the water will create drag. That'll keep your line very tight. And what it does, by decreasing that bow in the line, it's just like what we've done with our tag lines. Because of that extra line that's out because of the bow, when the tuna grabs the lure, there's a lot more slack line in the system. Putting the chain on keeps the line a lot tighter, keeps it tighter when the fish eats it as well. Okay, so that's number one. I find in the rough they're very good. You also notice the squids that I've got here, they're not real big. So again, like this one here's one of my favourite chains, just a little ruster. They're only a little squid. You'll see that we do have like big squids, like often marlin fishing, we'll fish like a 9 or a 12-inch squid in front of a chain. 9 and 12-inch squids are mint in a chain for marlin fishing because we want to make a lot of noise. The only downside to putting like a 12-inch squid in a chain in front of a lure is your outrigger won't be able to handle the weight. So now you've overloaded your rigger. You often get your clips pop all the time. When I first started putting chains on, you'd be trolling along, come down sea, and all your lures come out of the rigger because I can't handle the weight. So I found like a, I don't know, what do you boys call that, 12 inches? Maybe a 12-inch squid, wouldn't it? Anything from like a 4 to a 6-inch squid is kind of like a good size where it's not too big and it won't pull your lures out, but it's big enough to create some drag. What it'll also do for you is all the splashing and noise, same as from these here, is it'll help hide your leader, it'll help hide your hooks. Bluefin have great eyesight, and it'll help disguise a whole bunch of your stuff if you're not doing very well. I have customers that if they don't want to re-rig their lures for tuna fishing, will often just put chains on everything and it just hides everything. So as the chains go in front, they create a lot of bubbles and white noise in front of the lure, and it just hides any of the stuff that if they don't want to change. Okay. Any questions on the chains?
Do you find it makes the lures run a bit lazier?
The chains? Yes and no. Obviously, by putting the chain in front of it, it is going to weight the lure down. It's actually a great question, Joel. Correct. So often I'll put a chain, like I like running, my favorite lure on the short corner is a little undertaker, little slant face, and I'll run him what we call naked, so no chain, no bird, short corner. The lure swims great. Unfortunately, when it gets a bit rough or a big swell and it tends to blow out a lot, I'll then put a chain on him to calm him down, to then help him stay in the water, and that works really well. The chains can do a few things. I'll often only put a chain on a slant face lure to calm the lure down. Okay, if the water's calm enough, I will keep my slant face lures, or like a lure with a cut like that, I'll keep them without a chain if I can, and then usually I'll only put chains in front of lures like a ticket where it's got a flat face, or a heat that has a little cup. I'll put them in, or like a bullet, like a DLB, or a data. I'll put them in front of something where it doesn't matter too much. It's not actually dampening the action of the lure. Like this lure won't matter if it has anything in front of it. It's still going to pop every so often, and I'm not killing its action. With this lure here with the little slant, it's going to want to swim. It's going to want to breathe every like 3 to 5 seconds, and I can kill it with a chain. So the lures we run chains on will often vary as well, depending on the conditions. Or put more height on them. And like this, and the same thing, like this lure here, which is the one we're giving away tonight, the here for the party. I ran this with a chain I ran this with a chain pretty much all the time. And a small slant face like that, I found it ran good all the time, but I definitely find a chain can kill like a D-shackle that has a very large cup. If it's very calm, it'll kill the action on that. So just come talk to the experts and we'll let you know which ones will work better. Okay, any other questions on chains or birds? Okay,
Are they legal?
For IGFA?
Yeah.
No, don't tell these guys. No, it's the, what do they call it? It's up to the weighmaster. So if the weighmaster thinks it's impaired the fight, then he can disqualify your fish, but it is up to the weighmaster to make that call. If you're looking for a record or you're fishing for club points, then all of that stuff should disqualify your fish, yes.
Okay,
Yep.
so
Yep.
if you're in a tournament, then don't change it.
Yeah. But if you're fishing for fun, I would have at least 2 to 4 chains out at any time. Yeah. So just varying on the conditions and also on how they bite. So more stories from last year. I don't want to bore you guys with stories, but I did a trip down there in the end of July, I think, and we caught 40 in 4 days. One of the days we caught 10, and on the 10 we caught 7 on the same chain. And at one point, I had a run on this lure here where I had twin 9s in the lure. 9-barrow hooks. I've gone down to 8s, and I had twin 9s, and I missed like 3 in a row. and I had a chain running on the front of it, and it kept coming down, not hooking up. And I was like, this is, like I never, like with the taglines and everything, I never miss them. And I was like, what's going on? They were slightly smaller fish, like that 20 to 40 kilo fish, and I was running twin 9s in it. And so at one point I was like, kick the chain off. I was like, get rid of the chain, maybe they're eating the squids. I've had them eat the squids before. I've been watching my riggers before, and I've watched a bluefin come through and eat the chain before. They generally come back, but I have had it. And so I was like, kick the chain off. And like we ran the lure for like an hour, and we're running along, and like hadn't had anything for an hour, marking them, nothing. And then I went to say something, Paul, the dude who works with me, he stood up and he's like, can I put the chain on? I was like, yeah, I can put the chain back on. He put the chain back on, put it on the shotty. As the weight went up the shotgun pole, it like hit the top of the pole, the lure popped and tuna ate it. And I was like, okay, it's not the chain. And so we ended up downsizing the hooks down to 8s in the end the next day, and just had a way better hookup weight with the smaller hook, which is now why we run a lot of smaller hooks. So I'll get to that later on, but that story there, it was just one that the chains that trip were everything. So out of the 40 fish, we would have caught, I don't know, like 35 plus on the chains. The chain was like, we're running chains nearly on every lure. Now, the reason why I'm not somebody to stand here and say to you, run a chain on every lure, because the very next week I went in a mate's boat, ran chains on everything, because I was like, this is shit hot, this ran good last week. And we ended up catching, we only caught 6. We caught 6 for the 2 days, and we caught 1 on a chain. And by the end of the day, I only had 1 chain running, just because we'd caught 1 on the chain. Every other lure was naked, and we were getting bit real good on the naked lure. I couldn't tell you rhyme or reason why, but between the 2 trips, one trip I could not fish without a chain, the other trip it didn't want to be, you know. So it's I always try and keep, if I'm starting my day fishing, I'll have a couple with chains and a bird, and then I'll have a couple by themselves, and depending on how the fish are reacting is how I'll change my spread through the day. All right. Try not to get stuck in the mindset of you've caught 1 fish, that's how it is, you know. The gear, so rods and reels, obviously most of you guys will have trolling gear already. Anything that can hold kind of 500 metres of line. The only reason I say 500 metres of line is these fish are often schooling fish. Once we hook 1, we'll often keep going for as long as we can to try and hook the rest of the school. So sometimes you can get quite a bit of line out while the rest of them, I've had them before with 1 fish on, and it's taken kind of like 10 to 15 seconds, like it feels like a lifetime for the rest of the fish. You'll see them boiling on the other lures, and then eventually the rest of them all start going off. So sometimes that first fish will make that first commitment, and it can take a little while for the rest of the school to then join in. So we prefer to have reels that can hold at least 500 metres of line. Leader, if you're going to run mono, like 250 to 300, we often run 200-pound fluoro. Okay, so the reason we run the 200-pound fluoro is they do have pretty wicked teeth. Okay, so they've got real little sharp teeth, especially in a big one. We get a lot of fish that swallow the lures. You'll notice that the skirts on all these lures, we cut them down quite short. We make the lures quite small. When we're marlin fishing, like a marlin tries to stun its prey with its bill and then eat the fish, a bluefin's trying to swallow the prey whole. When he's trying to swallow the prey whole, you'll notice that most of the heads here have a lot of teeth marks on them. They're all covered in teeth marks. He's coming in from the front and eating that lower head first. When he's doing that, we've caught a heap with, I think I had like 3 last year come in dead. So like fighting them, come up to the boat dead, hooks are like, can't see them, and they've swallowed the lure completely. That leader is then sort of like that far to the corner of its mouth, and those teeth are just wearing on the leader. And so that's why we run the 200-pound fluoro. But if you're going to run mono, like 250 or 300, just for that abrasion. And then hooks, I run majority in my lures now the twin 8s. They're quite a small hook, but generally once that's in the corner, it's got a really good holding power. And after last year, I missed quite a few fish on the 9s and went down to the 8s, and then my hookup rate was way better. So just from my personal experience, we fish them quite close together, as you can see. Okay, so the front hook is jammed into the hook lock in the back of the lure. Show that there. Because that fish is eating head first, we want that front hook as close as we can to the lure head, and generally, like we catch probably like 70% on that front hook. We run that front hook up, so on all the lures, that front hook will be facing up. Okay, so when he eats that head first, we catch him on that front hook. the back hook's there, and we try and keep that back hook as far inside the skirt as we can. Cool.
So whereas for marlin, you'd have the back as far as you can.
With a marlin, I'd have that back hook just legal as far back as I can, but because he's got his whole bill and everything in front of him, in front of his mouth, we want that hook closer to his mouth while he's hitting the head of the lure. With a tuna, they're swallowing that front of that lure, so we want that hook as close to the head as we can. Cool. I've put in there like single hooks, like if you want to release them with big singles, good. We just use a de-hooking tool on the twin hooks because they obviously don't have anything to hold on to when you're trying to let them go.
So
Yep.
with the rods and reels and stuff.
Yep. That's a jigging rod, so like normal game rods.
Yeah,
Yep.
so that's what I was going to say. Is everybody using their marlin gear, or are they spending a whole lot of money on?
No, just normal marlin gear. So any tackle you're fishing, normal marlin gear. But we generally drop our leaders down, so that if you're fishing a wind-on leader, we'll make it lighter, 200 or 300 pound. And still, most people are fishing 15 to 60 kilo. It's your standard marlin fishing gear.
Any tips to avoid the big albers? What was your
So, I'll be honest, like last year, again, every year seems to be different for me, but anywhere I found big albacore, the bluefin seemed to be very close. We had it a lot last year, and this is not a rule. This is like not a rule, but we often found the big albacore in shallower than the bluefin. And so often I'd be trolling out, and I'd go through, get like 3 albacore in a row, and then once I got into the bluefin, then it would just be bluefin only. But I found that they would be like only a mile away from each other. So I don't know. They're going to eat all this stuff, albacore. They eat everything as well. But I often found once I found the big albacore, as long as I was catching big albacore, the bluefin were very close by. So I don't think it's a negative. Yeah. And they make good cubing for if you're going to cube them later. Fighting tunas. So they're pretty basic. It doesn't involve a lot of driving. The biggest thing's keeping the weight on them. Okay, so we're not chasing them down often. We just want to keep the weight on them. We fish quite a short leader, and you'll notice the chains are quite short as well. So our leader lengths are often 1.5 to 2 meters. So if you're fishing with a chain or without a chain, we run a very similar length leader. The concept behind that, okay, so that's the length of our leader. The reason why we want a very short leader is we want to be able to wind the fish right to the rod tip. Okay, we want to try and avoid leadering the fish as much as possible. I don't know if you guys have ever caught skipjack. You get a skipjack very close to the boat, you go to net it or gaff it, and the skipjack will spaz out and boost off. We've had the same happen with the southerns. We've had them where we're nearly about to gaff them, and then they've run back off 300 meters. If you have a wrap of the leader, again, this is only 200 pound. If your leaderman's not quick enough to let it go, it's very easy to break it. If you don't break it, it's very easy to pull the hook out. So we want to avoid leadering as much as we can until the end of the fight. And we just want to be able to wind that fish right to the rod tip. So as the wind on, if you're fishing a wind on leader, we want to just keep winding that fish right until basically that gets to the rod tip. And then your leaderman only has 1 or 2 grabs of the leader without wrapping, generally just by grabbing the leader and pinching it to pull the fish in case that fish does turn and take off. Okay. Keeping the boat down sea. So again, we just want to keep the weight on the fish. We don't want to get up sea of the fish and then the boat drift over the top of them. So when we're fighting, especially if we have multiple fish on, all I've done is I've just put the boat facing down sea. The boat's just clicked in gear, and I'll often just keep clicking it in and out of gear to keep the boat heading down sea, keeping the fish clear out the back, and it stops us drifting over the top of them, lines going under the boat, etc. Okay, because it's often rough down there, and it just means if you've got multiple fish on, it keeps them clear of each other, and you can just fight one at a time. As one comes in, you can clear one, and etc. Okay, but like all I do as soon as fish are on, I just, whatever way the boat doesn't, like with marlin fishing, when we're marlin fishing, it's very different because when we get a bite from a fish, we want to turn towards the fish and take the pressure off and we want to chase it down. With bluefin fishing, as soon as I'm hooked up, it doesn't matter about which side he ate on. I'll basically, as soon as the boys start clearing gear, I'll just turn the boat, whatever's the easiest to go down sea. Once I start heading down sea, I'll just take the boat just into gear, put the autopilot back on, or just get someone to drive down sea, and it just keeps everything tight. It keeps the weight on the other fish too if you have multiples on. Okay. Just in gear, or you're just in gear, so like a knot and a half. Yeah, and then if you're going too fast and the boys aren't gaining line, I'll come out of gear, but I'll just keep the nose facing down sea to keep it consistent. Gaffing your tuna. So I've brought a couple of gaffs along tonight. One of them's Injun's favourite, which you guys might have watched him on YouTube. He just put a video, I think, who put a video up? Some people put a video up. Yeah, was it you? And they killed one with that gaff. This is a spade gaff. I brought this along last year. This is my favourite gaff. Okay, this is our main one now. With gaffing bluefin, we don't want to use a flying gaff. Okay, because if you use a flying gaff, the idea with a flying gaff is that the fish can take off. So if you gaff it like a marlin and it goes off jumping, that no one gets hurt. The trouble with the tuna is that often when you sink the gaff, we just want to get the head out of the water and just immobilize its power. And if you use a flying gaff, often the steel is too big. This size hook's a 6-inch hook. Again, that might be 24 inches, but that's a 6-inch hook and not real heavy steel. They do have quite heavy gill plates, and they have quite heavy, like the scales running down their back from their gill plates is quite heavy. So like a flying gaff, you'll see guys gaff them in videos and stuff, and often the gaff won't go into the fish correctly because the steel's too thick and it's taking too much pressure to pull through into the meat. This sounds all real simple and basic stuff, and like a lot of guys I think overlook killing them. If you're going to kill them, like I said, these fish are internationally protected. If you're going to take one, kill it. Don't let it get away. I've had one get away on a boat where I was fishing on a mate's boat and he had real shitty gaffs, and we gaffed it and it actually pulled off the gaff and then had no other gaff, broke the leader, and that fish is probably dead. So I take it quite seriously. If we're going to take one home to eat, we kill it properly. Okay, the spade has a swiveling handle, which is real nice. The idea behind that is that if you gaff the fish, especially with a tuna, and like his nerves kick in and he arcs up and goes around and spins around like that, you don't break your wrist, which is real nice. And it's very strong. So my mate makes these for us, and he lifted a car. He put a forklift in and lifted a car with it so it can handle the pressure. They're made for commercial tuna boats. And it's a nice size hook. Like I carry this as my secondary gaff. So like whoever's gaffing the fish second will use this gaff, and this will help secure it and then help lift the fish on the boat without ruining a lot of meat. But this gaff, how do I put it? Because the tuna's round, picture a nice big fat round tuna, when the gaff goes into it, it won't grab a lot of meat. So if it only grabs like a little bit of meat and goes under the skin, if the fish is 100 plus kilos and arcs up, it'll tear out. Where when that goes into a fish, it has a lot more grip and it can grip a lot more meat, which will just stop it tearing out. Okay, so generally when we go down, we'll take 2 to 3 fixed head gaffs, quite short. We're in trailer boats, we don't need real long gaffs, but we want nice strong gaffs. Okay, generally one with a 6-inch hook and a couple with like 3 to 4-inch hooks. Questions on gaffs? No, cool.
How much is that spade one roughly?
They're $360, and they're real strong. I actually, it's not a brag, but I killed a 146 kilo sword with this the other day in 5 minutes, and gaffed it and held on myself. So I was pretty proud of that. But very strong. It's the second swordfish I've killed in 5 minutes that's over 140 kilos with it. So it's they're built really well. So I recommend them. All right. Where are we? There you go. There's a picture of me gaffing a nice tuna with it. So you can see I've got the spade, which would have been my first kill shot. My mates then gaffed it behind the head with the small gaff, which then just helps me lift it over the side. Okay. Kill bags. We sell lots of different kill bags from every different brand. We have like IC-Tech. There's an IC-Tech one from Tunism. IC-Tech, Stony Creek, Shimano. I can't even remember. We have lots of different brands. If you're going to go and take these fish, you need to take proper bags that can handle the fish that you're about to take. This is a marlin bag, which is quite handy because it's got open zips at each end, so we can fit quite a lot of tunas in it. The next big one's ice. Okay, how much do you need? What I recommend, there are charts online that if you kill a size fish, you need so much ice. I recommend taking as much as you can possibly carry. So by that, you know, as much, for me, when I'm going down there, my rig's quite heavy, so I'm already at like 3 ton. So I've got to be quite careful on how much ice I carry because I don't want to overweight myself, but I'll take like, to give you an idea, I'll take like a 185 and like an 86 and maybe like a 70 litre bin full of ice. I'll take like 3 bins full of ice down there. If you go to Yeehaa Bay, sometimes there isn't a lot of ice available, especially on those busy weekends, and it's expensive to buy it down there. So try and cart as much as you can. When icing these fish, if there's something that I can recommend is I don't take all my ice on the boat with me. Okay, so if I go down there, I'll take like an 80 to 100 litre bin full of ice on board. Now, once you kill these tunas, they're very hot, so they're endothermic, so they run hotter than the water they live in. Okay, so they're running really warm. Once we kill them, bleed them, gut them, gill them, we often will let them cool down on the deck for like 20 minutes. Okay, so we'll actually let their body temperatures come down just with the air temp before we put them into the ice. You put them straight into your ice, you're going to burn all your ice real quick. Okay, so let them cool down for a little bit, bleed them properly, let them cool down. I'll show you a very quick video shortly on how to do that. But what I recommend is take like 80 to 100 litre chili bin full of ice, take your tunas, whatever you're going to take for the day, put that ice on top of them and let them melt it. What they'll do is they will burn it pretty quick and you'll get a bit of a slurry going on. What I'll do then is I'll get back to the ramp, and once I'm back to the ramp, I'll then, like through the day of fishing for maybe 4 to 6 hours, I'll turn, like every so often, I'll keep moving the ice over the tunas, keep filling the gut cavity, and then once I get back to the ramp, I'll take the tunas out of that bag, ditch all that ice, put the tunas back in the bag, and then I'll have a chili bin in the back of the truck with like 135 litre bin of ice that I'll then put on them afterwards. Because those fish have already come down in temperature, they won't burn it. If you put that ice on top of them with the other ice that's already melted, it'll just melt it really quickly, and then often that ice will then hold them through for the next day. Okay, it's like any big animal you kill, you do not want to process it straight away. You want to try and let it sit for at least 24 hours for the meat to set. So if we're not going to cut it up for 24 hours, we need enough ice to hold it cold for that period of time. Okay. So.
Water coming out of the fillets and stuff, leaving it for...
No, it's just letting the meat set. So like if you cut it up while it's still warm. So the biggest issue is that like even after 6 hours, so I was staying at a house down there once. Guys killed a fish like early morning, didn't gut and gill it, put ice all around it, like a 50 kilo fish in a bag full of ice. We all get back to the house at like 8 o'clock, we're having beers, and when they cut the guts out of it 6 hours later after sitting in ice, the guts are still steaming. So the trouble is it's also like if you kill a 100 kilo fish, there's stuff online, it takes like 17 hours to chill the fish correctly. So, and if you cut the fish while it's still warm, the meat hasn't set properly. So it'll just taste better if you want it to be the best eating. All right, so it's a big one, just letting the meat set for as long as you can. There's nothing wrong if you're not getting back for 48 hours. There is nothing wrong leaving the fish whole, and it's better to leave the fish whole than to cut it up. As soon as you cut into the fish and start filling the fish, you're opening the flesh to bacteria, which will start breaking it down. Okay. If you vacuum pack it, like a lot of people like cut them up straight away and vacuum pack them and put them in the fridge for like 3 days until they come home. As soon as you vacuum pack them, the blood will start releasing from the flesh. As the blood comes out of the flesh, it'll be full of bacteria and it'll start ruining your fish while it's in the vacuum pack bag sitting in your fridge. You're better off to leave the fish in ice for 3 days whole than cutting it up on the spot. But what happens is when they sit in the ice, they will actually burn the ice around them. I don't have any photos, but you'll open the bag and there will be a gap. There'll be like a gap like that, like 1/2 inch gap around the fish. And so you actually need to roll the fish and move the ice back around them because the ice is no longer touching them anymore and it's no longer cooling the fish down. Okay, so what I recommend is when I'm down there for an extended period of time, I'll kill one that night, do what I've just said, put it in ice. The next morning before I go fishing, I'll leave it at the house, but I'll go and turn the fish over and repack it in the ice again before I leave, come back the next day, repack the fish again, and then the next day I'm cutting it up. Okay, and because I haven't exposed any of the flesh to bacteria yet, it's not breaking down like it would be if I'd cut it up. Okay.
So ideally sort of 48 hours.
Yeah, like 24 hours is ideal. Yeah, for eating. Yeah.
Will the Yeehaa weighmaster weigh a fish if you cut it?
Yeah, gutted and gilled. I've never weighed a fish with guts and gills. Yeah, you're just losing your weight.
Yeah. Some weighmasters won't do it.
They would call it mutilation. Mutilation's only if it is mutilated. But if you've gutted and gilled it, you just put on the thing gutted and gilled. It's not mutilation. Yeah. Other methods. So in previous years, like last year, somebody asked about jigging. There hadn't been a lot caught on jigs previous. Last year there was a lot of fish around, and we had large schools of fish. It really opened up jigging for them, and casting and cubing. In previous years I've tried jigging and cubing for them and have not been hugely successful. Caught heaps of albacore, like thousands of albacore. Last year we caught 9 jigging, and we caught a few. Sorry, I hooked some cubing and lost them, and we missed some stick baiting or popping. But jigging was a real big one. And now the next photo I'm going to show you here is the reason why I think why. So this is my sounder again while we're fighting, okay? So the photo on the left, you can actually see the tunas following the jig down, us hooking a tuna and then the tuna going back up to the surface. And then on the right is a photo of a school of tunas underneath us while we're fighting. The school of tunas is 30 meters thick. And in the past I've never had this opportunity. So like last year when I did this talk with you guys, as we saw in the numbers that were caught in previous years, there's 400 tunas caught the year before, and then there's 650 caught last year. The biomass of tunas that were caught last year was so much bigger, we were getting so many more schools. Previous years we were getting 1s, 2s, up to a quad. When we were fighting the quad, we were so dedicated to catching the ones that we had hooked, we didn't want to ruin the chance to catch another one, if that makes sense. Like, I've had this happen a little bit where I've been marking them, but it's been the first one we've caught for the trip, and I don't want to ruin catching one that we already have on the hook to try and catch one jigging, if that makes sense. On these trips, we'd caught so many already, like we'd caught 10 in a day already, where we don't care about losing one anymore. And we got put in a pretty cool situation, actually. And that photo on the left we had for about an hour. So we had a school of tunas stick with us for an hour, and we caught 6 on jig while we fought 2 tunas. Now, how the situation arose, in the morning we hooked a double. One of the tunas was slightly bigger, like an 80 kilo fish, and it actually, because we'd caught so many in the previous days beforehand, we didn't care. Once I started marking the sign, we started dropping jigs into them and catching them. We actually left the 2 guys that were fighting tunas on the other side, and me and my mate Parks caught 4 in a row before we'd even landed one of the other tunas. I kept just clicking the boat in gear, basically driving for me and my mate Parks so we could keep catching them on jig, and the other boys, we just left them to their own. We didn't care if they got cut off or broke off. We didn't care because we'd caught so many. So we hadn't had that opportunity until last year. After we did this, I've seen there is so much more opportunity for this to keep happening. So if you have jigging sets like this here, and I'll go through a bit of the jigging gear that I recommend and what we found worked and didn't work. So we caught a lot of fish on, let's go back to this, so I got to remember what I was, right now. So we're mainly fishing 200 to 300 gram jigs. I only had kingy jigs on board. Okay, so I'm just going to go through what I've done and what I saw. We just had kingy jigs on board, so we're just using what we had. We caught quite a few on that. We caught them on that, but I'll talk about that little hook later. We caught them on that, we caught them on that, and we caught them on another jig. And we basically just had the kingy jigs that we had on board. This wasn't the best jig, and the best jigs that we found were actually jigs that were more center weighted. Okay, so I'm going to talk through the positives and negatives of this. Center weighted, more fluttery. So we got a lot of bites on the drop. Now the only jigging rod that I had on board that day is I had a spinning set on board. And spin rods are cool because they make lots of noise. Now I was lucky enough to fish the Seychelles back in March, which is off Western Africa, and we went there jigging doggies for 10 days. And I kind of related the 2 fisheries together a lot. With the doggies, we caught a lot on the drop. And the center weighted jigs were the best jig we used. Okay, the jigging wasn't fast, very unlike kingy fishing, but we had a heap of bites on the drop. Downside with a spinning set is when you have the bail arm open, very hard to hook the fish on the drop. On that trip here, when we had this hot action, like you'd be dropping the jig and you'd look over in the bail, it would be completely slacked out. You'd close the bail arm, wind tight, fall off, start jigging, hook one, and then catch it. But we would get, I don't know, 3 times the bites on the drop than we did on the jig, if that makes sense. When we were jigging dogtooth in the Seychelles, same thing. Like the amount of bites we had on the drop when fishing a centre weighted jig that fell flat, we had a lot more action. I'd say we still caught heaps of bluefin, on a tail weighted jig. Like we still caught them on that jig there, but we missed a lot on the drop, because what's happening is on the drop, that jig's falling vertically, the hook rides up, the tuna comes in and eats the jig. This jig here, excuse that one there, but the teeth marks that are in this jig is actually from my last day jigging bluefin, and we actually didn't catch a bluefin on this jig, but all the teeth marks are in there are from bluefin that we had bites on the drop that we missed on the spinning rod. So, things I'd recommend, if you're wanting to target them on jigs, I would add a second hook, either a small hook on a solid ring like that, or a second assist hook. So as the jig is falling, we did in the Seychelles, we did the same thing. We added 2 hooks, and the amount that we caught on the drop was way higher. So I would add a second hook. From what I learned, I had like 3 jigs on board during this session, and I didn't have enough gear with me, which sounds rare, but I didn't have enough gear with me to like try this, you know. But this is what we did in the Seychelles, and it worked mean on the dogtooth. Sorry. So I'd add a secondary hook to the bottom, so as it's falling and that tuna comes in to eat, there is a hook closer to its mouth as it's falling. Having hook either end will help the jig fall flat, which will help you get more bites. The reason why I say 200 to 300 gram jigs is I tried smaller jigs. It's often windy, and the trouble with it being windy is that if you're just drifting, you'll see, I'm going back and forth a lot here, we're doing half a knot. So if you're doing half a knot and you throw your jig forward a little bit to get down 50 meters, your line angle is going to be scoped out so far. So we found around that 250 to 300 gram jig was heavy enough for us to get down to actually get 1 or 2 goes at them before we had to wind up and then throw it again. Because we can't back up on them, because we have fish hooked up, you know. So the trouble is the scenario of coming across this without having a fish on is quite hard. So I'm going to get into, like, this part here seems way more exciting for me than the rest of the bluefin trolling, because like we hooked a double and then ended up with 8 fish after the hour, because we put 6 on jig while the other 2 were hooked up. And we just literally left my mate there fighting this 80 kilo one. He was like, "Oh, can you drive?" And I was like, "Oh, we just kept throwing the jig and taking turns catching them." It was so much fun. So, but you have to like work with the situation you're given. The situation is we were lucky enough, because we had a double on, the first one came in quickly, the rest of the school followed him. When the school followed him, as long as we had a fish hooked up, the school stayed with us. As soon as we caught the last fish, the school was gone. We didn't have any cubes with us. One of the boys even said, he's like, "We should just cube that bluefin and that'll keep them there." I didn't really think that was kosher. So we didn't do that. If you catch big albacore, I'll be definitely cubing those things next year. Later in the next trip I went down, I actually did take pilchards with me and did some cubing, and I'll get on to that. But if you have jigging gear on board, you don't have cubes with you, the jigs I'd recommend would be center weighted jigs. I would fish them with 2 hooks, and I would take, if you can, an overhead set. Okay. Now the reason why I'd recommend an overhead over a spin, I have a lot of spin gear because it's cool. I will try this heavily this year, so I'll report back to you next year. The only reason is in the Seychelles with the overhead, it allowed us to keep a lot better touch with the jig on the fall, and as soon as we got bit, we're able to wind into it, a lot quicker. With the spinning reel, trying to close the bail arm and then wind on a spinning reel was very hard to keep the tension on the fish, and we lost a lot of doggies and we lost a lot of bluefin due to it as well. And when I say we lost a lot on the jigs, we caught like 1 in 5. Okay, so our hookup rate was shocking, and I think after going to Seychelles, an overhead combo would change the game for that. Fine on the jigging, fine when you're actually jigging, but you'd get 2 or 3 bites on the fall before you got down and started jigging. So why miss those bites on the fall? The overhead set will let you keep in touch. As soon as you get a bite, you can keep the drag on and you can just wind. With a spinning reel, because you don't have the torque and the power, it's a lot harder just to keep winding. We also found when we were getting bites and you were doing, the old mechanical jigging motion, as you're dropping the rod down with the spinning reel, as we gave that slack, we were getting a lot of bites coming tight, and then we were struggling to keep the line tight. The tunas were coming in, grabbing the jig and stalling out, and as they stalled out, they had no momentum. They weren't like a kingy where a kingy's going back to the bottom. They're just sitting there shaking their heads, and it was very hard to keep winding the reel. I think with the overhead set, it'll allow us basically just to, as soon as we get the bite, you can just keep cranking on the rod, keep the weight on him until he panics enough that he starts running. And so we lost a lot of fish at that point too. Okay. Any questions on that side? Because I think if you're going down bluefin fishing, I'd definitely have jigging sets on board and just keep an eye on your sounder while you're fighting fish. And if they come in, then that's when you can act on the situation.
You wouldn't stop if you saw that on your sounder.
I never. So the trouble is like the sounder screenshots I put up of the tunas before, right? So like these shots here with the tunas that we're marking, like we're marking pretty nice schools of them, but once we're going over them, I could never come back around and find them again. Every time I'd try and go back over them, I could never find them. So the only option I had was, once I had a tuna on and the school was following the tuna I had hooked, that was when I could start jigging. So popping and cubing. So that's actually the stick bait I caught. I have caught a southern on that stick bait. Now, we had this stick bait on that day. We had schools of tuna, so we had, when I say schools of tuna, we had this under the boat for like hours while we're jigging them. We only had stick baits on board. In the rough, I found the rough water, the stick bait was getting lost. As we're catching them as many on jig, we never had a bite on stick bait because it was like 10 to 15 knots. The stick bait was getting lost. So the next week when I went down, I took a popper, basically just like a GT popper, and I had a real big fish crash this and miss it. But if I was going to take stick baits or poppers, I'd either take like a sinking lure, okay, to allow it to get down, which you might as well just be jigging. But if you're not going to be jigging, you want to catch on top water, I would highly recommend either like a popping popper or a swimming popper over a stick bait, just because if you have wind noise on the surface, it's going to hide your lure and the fish will not see it. The fish are not coming up to the surface, they are sitting down at 30 meters. To raise that fish from 30 meters, the only way I could do that is I did get a bite on the popper when fishing it with fish marking through at 30 meters, okay? The other option is to cube. And by cubing, I just mean like cutting up pilchards or an albacore, not a bluefin, and just throwing small chunks over to get that school up to the surface for that. Questions on jigging and popping? Yep.
You drags on your jigging.
Yep.
You just go standard.
Just the same as kingy drags, to be honest. We caught them up to about 50 kilos on the jig, and they weren't super hard fighting. Like the biggest run would be like 100 meters. The one I caught on stickbait ran about 250 meters on the bite, so I'd recommend to have at least 300 meters of P6 to 8. Fishing your kingy drag, because they are, like they can be over 100 kilos. Leader, we're fishing 100-pound fluorocarbon. Because you're fishing visually in front of them, you're going to need to be light. So I'd recommend between 100 and 130-pound fluoro. We fished 100-pound fluoro. Actually lasted till the 7th fish, and the 7th fish we broke the leader on. And yeah, I'd fish overhead over spin. So yeah.
What setup is that one?
This might be yours. This is a Saltiga LD 55, man. JP 55. Lovely. Yeah. But again, it's just a set that's big enough to hold enough line. The biggest thing is capacity and the drag we need. This is the Haven. So if anyone hasn't been down there before or has been there and driven onto the rocks, I'll just give you a little run through. Okay. You see it every year. Like, I go down there a lot, so I see a lot of this. This is your boat ramp. Okay. Here. It's a 2-lane boat ramp, so there's 2 concrete ramps. There is also a pebble beach. Now, I haven't been down there this year. Correct me if anything has changed, but nothing's changed? Yeah. Same. Cool. Correct me if I'm wrong. So it's a 2-lane concrete ramp. Now, the reason this circle is here, we'll start at the ramp. You can launch from the jetty all the way across to the rocks. Now the reason why I've circled this here is on this far left hand side there's obviously not enough tidal water, and people driving on here have created a sandbank. This sandbank here at low tide is like 200 mils deep, and I've driven onto it before. I've had it where my mates backed the trailer down. The trailer is fully in the water, ready to drive on. I've got about 2 meters off the back of the trailer, maybe more, maybe 5 meters off the back of the trailer, and the boat stopped, and I've looked out the window and it's like that much water. So that has been created by boats driving on. So if you're there from like half tide down, when you look at this ramp, there are 2 concrete ramps. Only the right hand side is launchable from half tide down. Okay, so half tide down, I even had a mate who lives in Whakatane, goes there all the time. Last year during the bluefin season, got too excited, rushed in, drove down that side, ended up on the hard, had to put the boat back on the trailer, drive out, and then drive back down the other side. Okay, just good to keep in mind, have this stuff in the back of your mind. Okay, at low tide, we often go onto the rocks to launch. It's just small pebbles, you can launch on there fine, and there's no sandbar behind you. Okay, now at the end of this jetty, the local kids have dropped a whole bunch of rocks off this right hand corner here. The ladder is on that right hand corner. That is where you pick your boatman will pick your driver up from. Do not pull up alongside the jetty, just put your nose into the ladder, because that rock pile again extends up to the surface at low tide. Okay, it's really great. So nose into the jetty to pick up your guy. This area here is free space. This is often where we'll wait until our driver comes back for us to pick him up. Okay, this little marker here is our first beacon. It's a post with I think it has a light on it. Doesn't have a light on it. That's your first post. Now, these are rocks on the way out, okay, and these are your 2 markers. This is your port and starboard marker. Now those port and starboard markers aren't always there. When they have storms, they get washed out. What I highly recommend, and I haven't driven onto the rocks yet, thank God, but I highly recommend, because what happens is in the excitement of launching, it's 4:30 in the morning, you've just driven 7 hours, everyone's talking about bluefin fishing, everyone's real hot and excited. You go out through the markers, you steam out bluefin fishing, you catch a bluefin, you get more excited, and you run back in, and when you're running back in, you see the ramp, and you run for the ramp. And a lot of people will see this marker pole at high tide, and they run for that marker pole. And I've seen probably like 6 boats sitting in this area here that have run aground. Okay, so when we leave the haven in the morning, my biggest tip is you go around that marker, just put a waypoint and just put home, so that when you've had a few too many Chardonnays, you know where to aim. Okay, because I've been running back in and got like to here and been like hard turn out, and then like seen the markers out the corner. They're quite far. This is like 300 meters, so it's quite far away from where you need to go. Okay, yeah, just a little thing, because obviously, yeah, 4 o'clock in the morning, everyone's tired, excited, and you just make mistakes. So did a little drawing for you. Now, and the reason why I don't go from Whakatane is the tunas often eat better in the rough. Okay, I'm gonna advocate fishing in the rough. Over 10 knots, the fishing is 10 times better. Now, you're obviously down there on the weekend, but as the ramp survey went on Saturday, there was like 70 something boats out. Okay, and the fishing was pretty piss poor. On the Sunday, I got a text from Nicola, who does the ramp surveys, and on Sunday 11 boats went out, and at 11:30 she texted me saying 10 had caught at least 2. Okay, and it was like, so one day's calm enough for 70 to fish, the other day is calm enough for 11 to fish, and 10 of them catch. It is something about tunas and rough weather go hand in hand. Waihau Bay allows you to fish the rough because the travel's short. From Whakatane, you've got like a 30 to 40 mile run to get in deep enough water. Waihau Bay, you can put the lures in at 12 miles. You can troll to the 12 mile mark in 2 hours at 5 o'clock in the morning and be there on sunup in the right place. So the reason I like here is you can fish in slightly rougher weather. Again, going back to the Seychelles where I've just been, we had like something that really defined this for me. We'd be fishing at any time. So imagine this, you're in the Seychelles, It's 5 knots for 10 days. We're anchoring 200 nautical miles away from any land on seamounts in the middle of nowhere. It is that calm that we can anchor on top of them and just sleep on them all night long. That's how calm it is. There is no swell, not a wave. Okay, it's like the nicest weather you've ever pictured for 10 days. Now, when you're fishing for doggies, you're fishing on the edges. On the edges is where all the current pushes up. The whole time we're fishing, there are yellowfin blowing up all around us. And by that I mean anywhere around us, at any point you could look, and there is a yellowfin jumping, there's yellowfin splashing. You can see them everywhere. We wanted to eat yellowfin every day because it's delicious. We could not catch one until a rain squall came through. So if you've been in the tropics and you see those rain squalls come through, you see some rain coming, the wind comes with it. Like, no shit, one day we're trolling along, we're fishing on a game boat there, and we can not catch one. The boys are trying to catch them, like we got little baits out. Trolling along, rain squall comes through, we go through the rain squall, they're eating our 12-inch teasers. They're eating everything. We're getting like quads, catching them, rain squall's gone, back to 5 knots, no tunas. And it was like chalk and cheese. If the wind was not blowing, we could not catch a yellowfin, and we saw them for 12 hours of the day. And I've had the same experience at Waiha. I've had good fishing in calm, but I've had great fishing when it's like 8 to 15 knots, when it's a little bit choppy that we can fish in our boats, but it's not too rough that we can't fish. That is when I've had the best fishing. So
Is that line visibility?
I'm guessing so. Yeah. I'm guessing they like the turbulence on the surface, same as why we fish chains and stuff like that. Yeah.
Have you had any success at Elderman Knolls?
Me, little, no. I've had a few bites there, but no. Last year was real shit there. Yeah. But again, like going back to that original map that I was showing you, not all of them go into the Bay of Plenty. So not all the fish swim into the Bay of Plenty. So if we go back to that one, can't really zoom in on it, but quite often the fish can often miss the Bay of Plenty. So they just, because they turn that corner at Waiha, they definitely condense a lot more. But yeah, there can be a lot of fish caught there. Something I highly advocate is that do not fish in, okay? And when I say fish in, is don't hear somebody catching them at 1,400 meters and give you a mark, and then put the gear in at 1,000 and fish into the mark. So like run to the mark, put the gear in half a mile out from where you knew they were the day before and fish that area. I've had real bad cases of, like I've tried to help a lot of people down at Waiha, people that are staying with us, gone to an area, fishing, catch them, call the other boats up on the radio, and they'll be like, oh, I'm back at the 1,200 trolling out to you. I'm like, the best time of the day is 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. That is like the cream. That is the best part of the day. Put yourself in the best part for the best part of the day. And at 10:30, if you're sick, just go home.
Yeah, sure.
Find out where they are for the next day and then fish that part again the next day. Yeah, if I was sick. Otherwise, just drink Lion Red. Yeah. Cubing? Yeah, we did have luck. Last year I pulled hook on one fish and we had a whole bunch behind the boat, but I ran out of a 5-kilo box in like 30 minutes. So that's a $50. That's $100 an hour. So I'll probably try cubing like albacore or skipjack or something. But yeah, as soon as we had the fish under the boat like we did and we cubed last year, we had them react to the cube straight away until I ran out. And we had them feeding behind the boat the whole time.
You put a hook in the cube or we...
I kept some nice whole pilchards and I put a hook in a whole pilchard and got bit straight away. Yeah, but not until, I actually didn't get bit until I saw them eating the cubes. So like we cubed for about, I'd say like 20 minutes. And after 20 minutes, we're getting bites on the jig down deep. And then after about 20 minutes, I saw a few flashing through on the cube, threw a pilchard over and got bit straight away. Yeah. So, but again, until I do more of it, and then I'll come back with how to. And like for that kind of thing, I'd stick to like a 100-pound leader and a small hook. So like, these are like my kingy hooks. So I'd be fishing quite a small J hook to hide it. Because at that point there, they can be very selective with what they're eating. Giving them a whole nice pilly seems to be the trick. Yeah. Cool.
What's the cubing? What's the maximum depth that you set them on the salmon?
There I'd start cubing. We just started, the scenario we were in is we hooked one, had one on the rod. As we were fighting it on the leader, I was marking them down at like 30 meters. So I just started cubing. We killed that fish and then we just cubed, and it took like 20 minutes for them to come up the cubes.
So if you
So.
saw them at 80 or 100 meters.
I wouldn't bother, no. The queues would take too long. Yeah. Thank you guys for coming along. Hey, thank you guys. Quick, before you all run away, any more information, come see us at Yeehaa. Like I said, myself, Paul and Sato, during this part of the year, we give each other ample amounts of time off to go chase these things. Unfortunately, I just bought a house, so I move into that, so I'm a little bit buggered. But the other boys will be trying to fish every week they can, so come in and see us and we'll try and help you and put you in the right direction if we can. So thank you.